we're streaming now.
Cool.
Just checking via Twitch.
Yeah, sweet.
Go for at least 3 years.
I can pretend I'm Mitch talking about Pester.
Hypothetically, this should work.
It's a bit of a hack job. It's not as bad as it looks. Much worse.
It's much worse. It's literally.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
Well, they're teaching us 2012.
Okay.
And they only get us
managed to walk myself tonight. So I'm going to disappear at 6:15. I've got to be back here at 7:30. That way I can catch you guys.
Okay, so yeah.
I mean, West Coast West, if you guys are finishing,
Doesn't sound
if you guys are
bad.
finishing, I'm not too bad. Give me a call. No, I said you can leave it.
Oh yeah, of course. Yeah. We'll get started soon, guys. Whenever you're ready.
Just going to check for audio before we get started because last time. Oh, let's start recording. 6.1% CPU. I think we're good for recording.
Sweet.
Keep an eye on you, Raymond. That allows you to help me if you get nicked.
Test run, see you later.
If Ray gets a bit troublesome, I get you to help me look after him.
So we're giving streaming a go again tonight, and we're also giving. We didn't have much luck last week. I think we got a video but no audio. But we're going to try it again tonight and see how we go. We're also recording this one too, so if you want some notes or anything after the fact, hopefully we'll have a recording available. Thanks everyone for coming. We're going to have Michael delivering the news, and you got module of the month as well, don't you, Michael?
Yeah, I got module of the month.
Module of the month as well, awesome. And then Mitchell Gill will be doing a talk on Pester, unit testing in general, maybe with Pester. So that should be an informative talk. So yeah, cool. Thanks everyone for coming. Oh, we do have actually a bit of news as well. We're going to shut down the Meetup site. We're going to move across to Slack, and we're going to launch a website as a replacement for Meetup. So we'll still have a presence online outside of Slack, but we're going to drop the Meetup site, and we'll go from there.
So what's the rationale for that?
Meetup just likes to charge money for nothing. They're providing a service and they're trying to charge too much money for the service they're providing, so we're going to ditch it. And we still don't have sponsorship for the group.
It's free up to a certain date.
It is, and we're over that.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, and we've tried a couple of strategies to try and stay under, like removing inactive members and stuff like that.
Yeah, get rid of Ray.
Yeah.
I'll just come when
Yeah,
he
we
tells me to.
thought maybe we could do some PowerShell tests and then see who makes the cut. No. But yeah, they're not really providing much of a service, to be honest. And we could keep the presence as a page, but we'd probably end up breaching the terms of service. So we'll probably end up just killing it entirely.
Did this group get those rather attractive looking members sending messages?
Oh yes.
Comments,
Yeah. They're like the request to join stuff.
Oh no, there was this picture of this rather attractive woman sort of suggesting comments come on this a bit.
Yeah. Regarding that, so yeah, that was just a big rocky bot that was going around trying to make their porn site.
Yeah.
So one they'll do it all.
Yeah, we had to combat that, and then so we started asking people questions, and we sort of beat that, didn't we?
Yeah, we started asking people questions because they were just like, I'm like, what do you want to get out of PowerShell? And they're just like, Santa. And I'm like, GTFO.
Problem solved.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's the plan there. We'll still, the Slack channel seems to be going fairly well, or the Slack group seems to be going fairly well, so we'll keep that obviously. We'll launch a website. We'll still promote through LinkedIn, still promote through the Slack channel, and we'll have an online presence through the website. So cool. Thank you everyone for coming. Michael will do the news module of the month.
All right, sweet. Alrighty. First things first, let's switch. Alrighty, sweet. Look at that, representative. This is good. Actually, there's a couple of extra things I wanted to quickly add with that. So, website. We're wanting to kind of. We're looking for somebody to kind of obviously be advocate for that, and then obviously be responsible for maintaining that. So, if you're interested in anything like that, just come hit me up. It's going to be WordPress. You don't have to worry about hosting. I'm going to just host it on my environment at home. So we don't have to worry about that. NBN Life, so that's good. I think
so we'll be looking for contributors to the website and stuff like
contributors,
that.
things
Just
like
the
that.
same way we're always looking for speakers as well.
Yeah, exactly. As well as that, shirts. I'm wearing my Microsoft shirt today, but you guys probably see me getting around in my BrizPub shirt. If you guys are interested in a shirt, come hit me up. I know Rana's really interested, but obviously if you got the more people that's interested, then the cheaper it gets. At the moment, it's about $90 a shirt, but if we can get another person, that's about $80 a shirt, 89. I think it's $85, $89, something like that. So the more people that you get in, you can get the version 2.0 shirt. Actually, sorry, no, the version 3.0 because
What's this version?
that's version 2.0.
Oh, okay. What was version 1?
Nothing.
Oh, okay.
Because that's how PowerShell operated. So yeah, if you guys are interested, hit me up. That's really, really cool. Let's go to the next slide. So obviously, yeah, we're sponsored by Hudson. We've obviously got some sponsors. We had some sponsorship with iManage Software, so that was really cool. Yeah, obviously, an InSync Technology have been sponsoring us as well. PowerShell news. I think, yeah. So a couple of things. There's not really much in terms of what's being out there in terms of the news. It's fairly quiet. We did get a mention. It's actually quite surprising. We got a mention by on PowerShell.org. I don't even know how I was looking at it. I thought it was a rubbish YouTube video clip. I thought it was terrible. But basically, yeah, they're just giving us, they obviously popped up. So I think what they're doing is they're just going through different user groups and they're just looking at what what they're contributing to the PowerShell kind of PowerShell side of things. What else I got there? Yeah, that's pretty much it.
I actually, I don't know if you guys
Does
saw,
anyone-
there was, just in PowerShell news,
Yep.
the guy, the father of DSC,
Yeah, he left.
has left.
Yeah, he left. Yeah, that's right. I totally forgot about that.
He left Microsoft, and myself and among a few other people sort of maybe arced up on Twitter. I don't know if Twitter's good at that, but we
Twitter's good at
had our
arcing people
say-
up.
had our say on Twitter, and they're going to put out an official post sort of letting people know that there is a future in PowerShell, there is a future in DSC, even though both Jeffrey Snover and Bruce, I forget Bruce's surname, but
Yeah.
both moved on from Microsoft. Oh,
Yeah.
Jeffrey Snover hasn't moved on, he's moved to a new AI division, so yeah.
The next gen DSC has been something worse for like the past 3 years. Or
It's
something.
been a long time
crazy.
coming, yeah. And they actually said they'd make an announcement about that in January, and nothing happened. Literally nothing happened. And I saw another blog post. I don't know, was it a blog post? I don't remember where I saw it, but apparently the PowerShell team is now the smallest it's ever been.
Wow.
That's right, yeah, it's
Yeah.
community powered now.
Yeah, it's predominantly, yeah. It's
But you'd think
powered by
DSC, because DSC is still closed source, you'd think they'd have a bunch of engineers working on that, but they obviously don't have a lot.
Is DSC closed source?
It's like the new version, like no one can
Oh,
get
the new
engine.
version, yeah, what they're working on.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's right. They always plan to make it open source, but it's still closed source. They can't have a very big team working on it. No.
I honestly don't see how they're going to work, especially on the lease side when there's so much other config management tools like
Yeah.
PowerShell.
Yeah.
It's all-
Yeah, they're so late to the game. Oh yeah, the reason that I arced up on Twitter about it was because I was worried they're just going to pull the pin. You know, the new Microsoft likes to pull the pin on things like Edge, music, a bunch of other things.
They're not moving yet.
No, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Anyways, yeah.
All right. So yeah. Anyone else want to add anything to the news for PowerShell? I think it's fairly standard.
There was a new PS script analyzer release, I think, end of last week or something.
Yeah.
It added, I think, a few new features and improved the speed or the time it takes to execute. So that was a nice thing to see.
Because that would have, yeah, you would have been loving that.
That's fun.
You're like literal path. I don't know, man. I was actually having a look at your code and I was like, mate, it was actually some pretty heavy reading. I was like, because you kind of have to. It's just like a never-ending story. You're like, if someone decides to splat inside a splat inside a splat, you know, you're going, well, how do you deal with that? And you can't you pretty much have to execute it and pray that. But the thing is, you can't execute it because PowerShell doesn't have like that kind of capability. But anyway, moving forward. Module of the month. I'm like looking at the next slide. I'm like, huh? So, all right, module of the month. So, I don't know if you guys have been watching my stream. So I'm doing a couple of live streams. I'm kind of trying to push us out there a bit more. I actually live streamed a bit of a nice little solution here to demo Logic module of the month. Now, this is technically not a module of the month, but I came across this article from this guy. Can't remember his name. It's something really random. But basically, what it does is it adds two-factor authentication and has that it uses Google's two-factor authentication and brings that functionality into PowerShell. So I thought, well, why not? Let's write some sort of kind of interaction where we can actually trigger a login and use that two-factor. So let's open up code. So I've got my demo user here. So our demo user is got Barry White up there. Sorry about the thing. Let me see if I can scroll in for you guys. How do you scroll? Like
What's be Control Plus?
Control Plus. Okay, I don't want to. No, sorry. Yes, Control Plus. Ah, sorry, mate. You're gonna be like everything's gonna be super zoomed in. So we got Barry White there. Username, password, as you can see, super secure. It's just a JSON file. And I've got this MFA secret key. So that's a 5-bit key that you can generate, and that 5-bit key is basically used to calculate the pen. And then we've just got this cool data object there, which is returning a property called data. So that basically we're just going to call that our secret content. So what I did was, to actually test this process, this is exclusively PowerShell and just Azure products. So basically, I've got a web form, which basically, which we're going to quickly show you guys. It's really basic, as you can see. We've got, oh mate, I'm going to have to zoom this one in. Sorry, mate. I'm going to have like
Control Plus should do the same thing.
Should it?
Yeah, it should.
There we go. Look at that. So username Barry White, password, MFA pen, and then login. So behind the scenes, all it is just a bit of JavaScript that triggers, sends a REST request to an API endpoint. That API endpoint is an Azure Logic app. So if you guys are not familiar with Azure Logic apps, that's basically a technology that Azure developed. It just allows you to create really simple flows within Azure to be able to interact with different systems. In this instance, I've just got a post and a web. I can't remember the first word. It's web something, or send web response, which is basically just your similar is your API endpoint. So just sending a REST API endpoint. From that, I'm triggering an Azure Automation Runbook, hybrid runbook worker, which is running a hybrid PowerShell runbook on my machine at home. And then basically it's running PowerShell on that actual machine and then returning it back. So let's have a quick look. I'll just quickly show you the PowerShell so you guys are not in the dark at the moment. I've lost my cursor. There it is. Hang on. I think I need to go. Actually,
I don't think your PC is going to be the same over again.
yeah, I think I've violated it.
So rather format it.
Yeah, I'll do a reinstall.
Yeah, rinse and reinstall.
New hard drive, new RAM, fine.
What? Okay. Okay, so basically I've just got a bit of a, we're going to have to control, was it Control Plus? Control Shift minus. There we go, so we've just got a bit of a username, password, so they're just obviously parameters that basically the logic app's passing through to the automation runbook. This is an automation runbook that, this is the code, but this is not sitting in Azure at the moment. So it's basically the same code that's sitting in Azure, but I'm not promoting home and opening up the portal and looking at it in there because we'll be here all day. So from that, basically I've got some automation variables. So basic automation variables are where you can put variables inside of Azure Automation that basically automation can take those variables out. So usually you have them stored as secure strings. These are the kinds of things you pass passwords or something like that as secure strings into. But they're generally just like your global things that you want to pass in. I'm just dot sourcing my helpers in because I'm super lazy. So basically I've got a subdirectory on the hybrid runbook worker, which it's referencing. Where is it? Hybrid runbook worker roles. I'm just going to drag this across so you guys can see this. You guys can't see that. So look, there's two PowerShell scripts there. They're just executing them and dot sourcing them in. So what we've got there is one is this test object property. What that basically does, it looks at the, it's just a function that allows you to test whether that property exists or not. it's just a cleaner way of testing it from that than rather than having to do, you know, a get type or a get member and looking at the property of the object. It's just one of my pieces of code that I like to recycle. Open with VS Code. Yep. And then the final one is this, and this is basically the Google Authenticator. So it's an 80-bit key basically to encoded secret to a URL that Google charts, and we'll show you the key as a QR code. It's really cool. So there's two commandments that you can use. I'll make sure I put the link in for you guys to grab this. But basically, you've got new Google Authenticator secret, so that generates your secret. You can pass a custom secret in there, but basically, if you don't, it'll just randomly generate you one. I'm not going to go through and explain the process because it's very in depth. I definitely encourage you guys to read it in your own time if you're interested. So as you can see there, you're doing some. We're basically doing some. Obviously, you have 5-bit per character. It doesn't align with 8-bit per byte input, so you need to be careful. Post some bits. So doing bits and pieces there. Bits of so it's fairly in depth, but it's really cool. So obviously the way that it works is that once it generates that, it actually builds out a REST query. Actually, it's not a REST query; it's just a encoded URL. Sends it off to Google, and then basically Google actually gives you that nice QR code that you can actually take a photo of. Then once you got that, you got it in your phone, then basically you're pretty much set. So the way that it actually calculates the MFA is it just does it does a calculation off that secret. So the secret is reversible, and it's basically that's how it's just using the epoch standard for Unix to calculate the timestamp. Basically, those two will form a specific pin, and then it grabs the last 6 digits. Interestingly enough, it's not as secure as you think. I was kind of a little bit blown away by that, so I was like, oh, okay, it's quite interesting. But anyway, enough of that. Let's actually get to the demo. So if I can find, there we go. So Barry White, password's password, MFA pin. So like I said, remember, this is executing PowerShell on that hybrid runbook worker on my machine at home. So basically doing full remote execution here. So I'm going to go to my Google Authenticator. Sweet, we've got a nice tick over. So pin is 940566. 940566. Enter doesn't work because I'm too lazy to write proper JavaScript. As you can see, it's basically no loading screen because, again, I'm too lazy to write good JavaScript. So basically, it's just executing asynchronously. We should get a response back as a JavaScript alert because I'm too lazy to write any sort of elements and create divs and elements. So as you can see here, you've got your success response. I don't know if you guys can see that. Basically, it's just returned the entire user object. Really bad though because you obviously just handed a whole bunch of good stuff over the internet for somebody. But it basically just proves the point. And we can actually show you guys that that's actually executing. So I can change that. Let's see if this key's changed because it should just say incorrect MFA. Yeah, so the key's changed now. So if we hit login again, so obviously the key's changed. Wait for it to asynchronously execute. This is a great times when you have demos like this. Next thing you know, nothing happens, and then I'll go jump on the runbook and I'm like, oh, yeah, there you go. So incorrect MFA, and that's basically all PowerShell. So it's basically the PowerShell, that runbook that's running is looking at all the specific stuff. So it's just doing some basic validation. It's nothing special, but it's pretty cool. So do you guys have any questions or anything? I definitely recommend you checking it out, at least for the sake of learning how two-factor auth works, because I found that, I'll send the links to you guys and I'll chuck them on the channel. It's really good to just obviously get a bit of an understanding of how that all kind of
So just out of interest, Michael, you could have run it all on the Logic app, could you?
Yes, I could run it all on Logic app. I could have, to be honest, the better way would have to be an Azure function.
Yeah.
But I don't know how to make Azure functions talk to automation yet.
Yeah.
I'm not like, so if you guys know how to do that, let me know, because
Just use Event Grid.
I could use an event grid,
Yeah.
but I'm like,
For next time.
I'm like, I just want to be able to talk to it directly. I don't
Yeah,
want to do any
okay.
sort of, just like talk to it.
Yeah.
It's like, obviously, if you guys are not familiar with functions, definitely check it out. Azure Functions is really good. So it's kind of going down that event-driven development, and it's really cheap too, really cheap. So next item, no, we've done that. Live stream. So Obviously, you guys with live streaming right now. Hi guys. Hi guys. So basically, if you guys are interested in doing any sort of, just quickly check for comments. Sorry guys. I don't think
No comments.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, if you guys are interested in doing a live stream,
Yeah,
you can do
yeah.
one.
If you guys are interested in live streaming, let me know. I'll just send you a key. Like I know how to make it all work now since I've got a bit more understanding on how to make it work. So I can just create events. You guys tell me what you want to do. I can create the event, make it look pretty. Obviously, you know,
this
they're
is starting to take off too.
Yeah.
I've seen a couple of people doing this on Twitch.
Yeah.
Where they write PowerShell and have people, you know, in the comments
contributing to the
to
PowerShell
the stream.
Yeah, it's really good. It's really
Yeah,
good.
It's really starting to take
Yep.
off. So if you're interested in sharing your knowledge and even learning from other people,
Yep.
that's a great way to do it.
Yeah, and so basically, when we're doing hackathons, obviously you guys probably see me rabbiting on the comments. A couple of things are like, obviously we've got VS Code live. With the exception of Christian, it should work because Christian's Surface is just, I don't know what's going on there. You try and run it, it doesn't work. But VS Code Live obviously allows for simultaneous editing and obviously collaboration between multiple people. So we have our platform to be able to actually interact. So you guys don't have to be live on the stream. You can be contributing, jump on a Discord server with me. You can be chatting, you know, in Discord, and then obviously contributing to the project via that.
Yeah, if you haven't used VS Code Live Share before, it is very
It is
nice.
really good. It's really
When it
good.
works.
It's just really good when it works.
Yeah.
He's the exception. So a couple of things I would like, obviously these are just ideas. I've kind of got a bit of an ideas list. I don't particularly like, I kind of obviously want to focus on PowerShell, so it's all obviously to be around PowerShell. But like we can pretty much just, like we can do things for fun. We can work on our projects, so it doesn't have to be explicitly, you know, it doesn't have to be, you know, like we're working on a work project or something like that. Like, so a good example is, let's update the PS logging PowerShell module. I think that would be excellent. I think adding CM trace logging and analytics would be fantastic to the module because being able to have that capability, you can just send it.
Except, am I the only person who can't write queries in log analytics? Like, does anyone use log analytics? They don't write queries in that. It's horrible.
You have to find the bloody help doc.
Yeah, it's brutal. The learning curve is steep.
I think the thing is though, is these kinds of things that basically, if we can like, obviously if we do that, we're obviously putting ourselves on the map and we obviously are contributing to the PowerShell. Other things, I've done this before, but I'm actually quite keen to do it again. I do think we're revisiting the aimbot for Battlefield 4 would be a lot of fun. So we'll write an aimbot for Battlefield 4. Like, we're not going to test it in multiplayer because that'll be against the YouTube and Twitch's terms of agreement. But we can definitely test it in, obviously, for proof of concept. So that's obviously, I know there's some complex math equations and stuff needing to be done, so that's definitely a lot of fun. And we can obviously move that into other areas as well. So, like, it's been a project I've been wanting to do, like I've been working on off and on for a very long time, which is basically tracking storm cells using bomb radar images. So obviously, you can take that technology and then use aimbot technology to do that. Sounds ludicrous. I can see your face like, what?
Yeah,
This guy's on drugs.
I'm like,
But they sound completely disconnected, but the technology underlying is the same.
I just thought you'd just.
No, you get them
intercept
storms, you
and save
shoot
the-
them.
Yeah, you get that storm and then you shoot it with an AK. Other things like just really like even knowledge-based stuff. So like we had a bit of a discussion about I think it was the difference between write output and return. I was thinking, why don't we just reverse engineer PowerShell core? Like it sounds ludicrous and go find out for ourselves. Like I know it sounds a little crazy, but these are the kinds of ideas I'm just throwing out there so you guys can kind of like, you know, have a bit of an idea. And there's actually an interesting one, reviewing the PowerShell culture settings and see if we can switch the culture settings to make PowerShell case sensitive. You can imagine what would happen as a script if you put that as your first line and then watch everything break.
Or space sensitive.
Yeah. So other things like so previous things that like obviously previous live events that we've done. So like my REST talk, Jordan with your PowerShell remoting talks, things like that. We can basically live stream as well. I'm like, are you like laughing there? No, I'm like, no, you're just looking tired. So these kinds of things that I'm obviously, really interested in. At the moment, I'm kind of running through a PowerShell Runner 101 with Christian, so we're kind of just going through the different elements. At the same time, I'm looking at PowerShell Org this weekend, which is, that's going to be interesting. Any ideas, come to me. We can obviously, try and get stuff happening. I'm also interested in, we can probably do an OAuth 2 lesson if you're really interested. We can go through the details, ins and outs of OAuth 2.0, so if you're interested in that. So anyway, let's keep going. No scripting games, guys. I was lazy. I didn't come up with a challenge. I was kind of sitting there yesterday and I was like, oh shit. I didn't really think about that. Sorry guys, so that's my bad.
You could make the challenge come up with a scripting game for next month.
Yeah, that's the challenge, guys.
But you can't compete.
So obviously now with the keynote talk, we've got Mitchell, so give him a big talk, I'll give him a big hand, and compliment his small cup.
So last me to hold 2 minutes. Hi all. Unit testing with Pester. This is what we're talking about. This is great. Here we go. I assume you guys all know what Pester is. If you don't, yeah, sort of.
Sure, I don't.
Okay, yeah, well, good thing I did. It's community-driven testing framework for PowerShell, specifically for PowerShell.
Is it still, is it driven, is it under the PowerShell umbrella on GitHub, or is it still its own thing?
No, it's still its own thing.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, it's really driven for PowerShell. You can use it to test other things, though, all sorts of things. So, but it's supported. Obviously, its core is that. So you can use it for all sorts of things. It's been around a long time, all the way from 2, all the way up to 6.0. Multi-platform since 4. I haven't actually used it multi-platform in those versions, but in core it works great. Windows, Linux, Mac OS. There's limitations on the Linux and Mac OS versions. Certain functions don't work the same way. But it's all documented there. But anyway, we're Windows, so it works pretty great. It's not magic. Often people look at the Pester scripts and go, what the hell? But it's just PowerShell, just more PowerShell really. So once you understand its syntax, it's really quite easy to work with. So why should we, this is something even I've said before, we've been working in PowerShell a long time, never really worked with Pester until, more recently. Why should we do the extra? I can run a script, I can test it for parameters, I know it works. Why should we bother?
Mate, you just run it. Right.
Just run it.
You get this question a lot.
It does, and often, it can be the difference between, okay, I've got to ship some code. Now I have to do some tests. So I can just ship it. It's ready. I've tested it. Why can't I just ship it? So, why should we bother testing? It's great. It's awesome. That's why. that's a reason I've come to learn. It's awesome, and you'll learn that. Look, these days, in terms of DevOps, your code is being put into production. It's not just running IT backends. It's running real systems. They're not just scripts now. They're literal pieces of software that we're putting out there, and we're doing it more and more and more. So, it's being relied upon for critical business processes, and this is happening a lot. And sometimes you don't even realize it until something breaks. That this is running something that's really super important. Even just a backup, it could be running backups, and then you lose something, and you realize the script broke 2 months ago, and you had no idea. Faster turnaround with peer review, so you should really be doing this. And this is just to do with maturity of DevOps teams, as you find this is just happening more and more. As you get bigger teams and more people working on the same projects, it's become super critical. We've found this in our own teams that as soon as we got 2 extra people, peer review became impossible. Because you could have 1,000-line script running, developed by 2 people in isolation, and then suddenly you get review, and it takes you a week to figure out what the hell it even does. So testing allows you to work out what it actually does, how it works, and gives you some confidence about the assumptions that they're making. Because really, reading someone else's code is making assumptions about how something works. It's inevitable. So And your future self and others will thank you. I can attest to that.
No one likes to work on a long weekend.
No. You'll thank yourself, even if it's not if it's not someone else. You will come back to it in a month and tell me you remember how something works. You won't. So that it helps a lot, and especially when you're making changes to it. So it makes all of our lives easier. So it's worth the effort. So it's not magic, like I said before. What does it actually look like? This is actually this is what it boils down to. We've got a describe at the top. So Pester is all about testing functions. I'll go into it later, but you can use it to actually test, full-blown script blocks. But it's designed around functions. So you put all your functions and then you test those. So every Pester test is wrapped around a describe for your particular function, and then we move on to a context. So what, like your scenario, essentially. So you wrap that around your scenario. When I'm using these parameters, what if this happens, what if this happens? So that's your context. You do your mocks, and I'll go into more detail about what mocks are, but any commandlets essentially that you don't want to run for real. You want to use testing to mock that. And you can see before the assertations, I'm actually running the function and putting its result in there. You can do that several different ways, but in this case, I've run my function with the parameters I want, piping the result into result, and then we've got our assertations. So it should do this. So that's essentially all the structure of a Pester test. That's what it is. It's just that, iterate, in infinitum. So essentially you get the it and the should. So should and should be not, I'll show you some examples of that, but that's essentially the layout. That's as simple as it is. And we just iterate that more and use more of the features, but that's essentially all it is. So what is unit testing specifically? We've got testing, we've got integration testing, unit testing. So I've focused on unit testing. So what's that? It's essentially isolating your code. So you just want to test your code. You don't really care about all the other commandlets. You don't care about AD or anything else. You don't want to rely on that. You're trying to test what your code does. So unit testing allows you to do that quickly. Allows you to rapidly test. So when you don't have to build a file system or interact with AD or a database, you can test super fast in milliseconds. And good unit testing practice says your tests should take milliseconds, and that way you can constantly test. In the development world, they do tests on typing essentially. So you can literally be putting, and every character you put, it's running the test over and over and over again. So this is just something that developers have been doing for ages. Test anywhere. This is actually something that people don't really realize, and it's super useful. When you isolate it yourself, you don't have to be where your stuff is. We've all got security permissions for databases and Salesforce and other web things. You don't need that. You don't even need an internet connection if you do it right. I code on the train all the time, and the testing is totally isolated. So I can just bang out some code and know it works without having to be accessing anything else because it's completely isolated. Mocking. So mocking makes that all possible, essentially. So a unit test is something where you've mocked all your commandlets. So not the bad kind of mocking, just it's good. So let's actually look at some practical examples. Switch to here. There we go. Can you guys see that? You want me to blow it up a bit more?
Maybe once.
Yeah, one more. Yep, that's good.
Okay, so this is my mini little function. Find me instance. It's a .NET Core looking for a AWS instance. Essentially, I've taken this out of some stuff I've actually done and simplified it a little bit. But essentially, all it does is you give it an instance ID, a region, and it will and some AMI IDs, and it will return it if it matches. So it really doesn't do much. It's basically just a wrapper. It's actually just calling get EC2 instance, and essentially just telling me if the instance that I've retrieved has one of the things that I've matched. So if I'm looking for that, is it that one? Yes or no? Essentially, so kept it very simple. I give it an array of AMI IDs, and it will tell me is that instance, was it created with that AMI ID? That's all it does. So if we look at the actual unit test for that, there we go. All right, so you can see here's my describe. I've imported the .NET Core AWS PowerShell module because I need that. So essentially, this is just a PS1 file, so nothing magical there. I've got my describe. I've .sourced in my function, so I can actually call it. So everything within a describe block is isolated, and again, it goes down further as you go. So in the context, I can have multiple contextors, and they won't interact with each other unless I define something outside of that. So I can define some test code inside my describe, and then all of my contexts will see that. Or if I describe it in here, nothing else will see that. So I don't have to clean up after myself or anything like that. It does all the work for you. So I can just build some, like get some parameters, put some stuff in the Pester test drive, which is a temporary directory. And as soon as this code finishes, the next context will be completely clean again. So it just makes everything super, super simple. So in this case, testing, if I give it some information. So what I've actually done, so I'm using a mock here. You actually look, this mock here, and I'm forcing it to return an object. So I'm actually overriding the functionality of that. And the mock command looks at the commandlet and does all the work for me. So I don't need to give it any more information. As long as it knows that commandlet exists, it'll figure everything else out. In this case, I'm forcing it. If I call that with anything, it will return this object no matter what. So my code, when it executes, will always return this object regardless. You can give it parameter filters and other more complex stuff. I'll show you some examples later, but for simplicity's sake, when my script runs, it's always going to return this object, and I'll show you what it looks like.
So
Yep.
a quick question. So when you run a mock,
Yep.
obviously it's going to randomly generate. In that instance, it'll get an EC2 instance, a complete random one from that specific subset.
I'll show you this. This is actually a JSON object I've converted.
Yep.
It is. I literally did a query using get EC2 instance,
Yeah.
converted it to JSON.
Yep.
So it will just return that exact one.
Okay.
So it looks like a real EC2 instance.
Looks like a real one.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yep.
Yeah. So I'll actually show you that.
Do mocks work for fully qualified commandlet names?
Yes. So you can, it's got a lot of flexibility. So you can override this with your own ones. You can do all sorts of stuff. Yeah, it's quite good. So you can mock it in one way on your own one inside that context, and then use a completely different commandlet in the next context. That's totally different with the same name. So I'll just quickly show you all I did was essentially do that query myself, convert it to JSON, and just store it, and that way I can just edit it later. So that's one of them there. It's literally just it's just a JSON object. Yep. Convert that from JSON, it just gives me a PS object. I'm not casting it to a type or anything like that in this case, but I could if I wanted to. You can see that's a standard data. So I see AMI ID. So I've actually used this several times because it's just text. I can then just modify the fields that I want and just copy paste it to change the scenario a little bit, like change the AMI ID or whatever I want. So I've used that a lot. Just converting it to JSON makes it.
When you're doing a mock,
Yep.
Let's say, like I thought from like when you do a mock in Pester, it's basically you can give it, for example, get EC2 instance. It'll just go get a random EC2 instance and like...
No, it won't generate the data for you.
Yep.
You've got to do that.
Okay.
Because it doesn't know what it should return.
Yep.
It knows all the parameters and it figures that out by just looking through that, the commandlet. But yeah, it can't generate the data for you. You've got to do that.
Okay, so because I was kind of thinking along the lines of, you know, if like it was going to do like get EC2 instance, and that would, you know, return a collection of EC2 instances that you'd have in your AWS subscription, and then basically you'll just do like, you know, a select random.
Yeah, essentially, the reason that Mitch is returning dummy data is because as soon as you actually touch AWS, that jumps outside the realm of unit testing and becomes integration testing. So we have to fake the data, so we're not dependent on AWS being online.
Okay.
And
That's
AWS
right.
returning the data you expect it to.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
In this case, that's right.
So gotcha.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So that's why we're mocking it exactly. So we don't have to rely on AWS at all for that. So yeah, I don't even need an internet connection. All this unit testing just works.
Yeah.
So.
I know the it section can have test cases to run that of like different scenarios. Can you do the same thing with describe? So run this same test but return this selection of data, like.
Yeah. So you can actually do all of it just in a describe. You don't need a context. You can just put some its in your describe.
I mean, so like, because I've done it a bit differently before. I've actually put get the result in the it section.
Yeah.
And one of the cases is I want to call this command multiple times.
Yes.
But I want to return 5 different scenarios.
Yes.
And instead of repeating the it 5 different times, I have 5 different test cases associated with it.
Yeah.
Can you do that to describe as well? So you can say, I'm calling this 5 times, but get EC2 instance will be returning scenario 1, then scenario 2, then scenario 3.
So you mean multiple describes?
Yes.
Same thing?
No.
You mean like passing data, like theories?
Yeah, so I don't know if you've used Cucumber before or something
No,
like
I
that.
haven't.
But basically, it's run this particular context 5 times, but in each iteration that it goes through, return iteration 1, return iteration 2.
No. You've got to be more specific. I know I've worked with XUnit recently, and it makes a lot of that. You can do it in a lot less code. Yeah. But you know, it's scoped into each section. So you know, you could, if you call a result here, which I do in some cases. But you have to do. You've got to be a bit more verbose with it.
I know you can definitely do it with it. I was wondering whether you can do it with context. Because I've done it before with it.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. I don't know.
Can you use mock in it section, or does it have to be done in context?
I don't know. That's a good question. I haven't actually done that. Yeah, I'm not sure. I don't see why you.
The reason we would have tried it is because a mock would be more part of your arranging, not your asserting, and it is the assert part of your test.
Yeah.
So that's probably why we haven't tried it.
Yeah. In general, that's how they recommend you do it. So that's the only way I've ever done it, really. So probably in theory, because it is scoped to that, it probably would work. Yeah. Okay, so we've got that. We've got our mock. We've got some test data. We've called it. We've got our it. So what is a mock? I've already covered it a little bit, but it replaces the behavior of a commandlet. It doesn't work for .NET methods. If you use a lot of .NET methods, what they recommend is you wrap it in a helper function and then you mock that, and that works fine. A lot of programming languages, and I've run into this with C#, when you are developing with testing in mind, you often have to change your code in order to make it testable. So that's just one of those things. So if you're using .NET methods a lot and you want to test them with mocks, you've got to wrap them in helper functions for the moment. So like I said, it's only active inside the describer context. I don't know if it's in the it. I'll have to try that actually, but
trust out everything in the it. See what happens.
Let's see what happens. Yeah. You can do a mock, at the outer layer or an inner layer, and it just makes iterating your tests really simple because you don't have to go and clean it up, like I said. So back to the code. So we've got our. I'll actually run this test. Actually, I'll show you what it actually looks like. Cool.
That's more like it.
Yeah, there we go.
It's like PowerShell.
That needs to be a little bit bigger.
Oh, right.
Just a tab, like.
Yeah, like I don't know, like 200% more.
Well, you can't read that tiny writing?
Oh.
So is that even possible with Windows console?
Yeah, you can multi-line select now on Windows console.
Oh, it's
boom.
Boom.
I've been reading some of the blog posts that the console team are going through. It seems like they've just pretty much ripped the guts out of the old con host and massively changed
Better?
it with Windows 10.
Sweet, that looks much better.
Alright, here we go. Okay, so that's the wrong one. There we go. So in order to run the test, we do an invoke Pester. You can actually just execute it.
Yeah.
And if you've got Pester in there, it will work. But if you want things like code coverage, and you've got to use invoke Pester. So
Is there a reason you chose the name .tests?
yes, it's it's a naming structure. So I've got .unit, .function, .unit, .tests. I actually can't remember what the best practice for that is, but I think it might be that. But they do slight variations on that as well. I don't think you need to be as verbose, but you can do .integration tests. You can put them in a subfolder. Just makes everything nice and clean.
Pretty sure VS Code knows when you have the .test extension that it's Pester, so it gives you that handy inline run for
Yes.
tests.
Yeah. All right, so we invoke that. Unit test. It's always going to work. It's always going to work. I use this on the train all the time.
Train.
On the train. Always on the train. All
It's
right.
just as reliable as Translate.
I was going to say, and then you let Michael touch
Way
his
more
phone.
reliable than that. All right, so just gives us some nice output. Obviously, we've got our describe. I think it was pulling in that JSON file, and that's why it was taking a while to get past that. So pull it in here. We've got a few tests. Should return some valid objects. Got another context. Yeah. So should throw. I'll show you that one in a second. That's super useful. So when your code should exit, you can actually test for that using a special should throw. So you can see it completed in 9 seconds, so that's not bad considering pulled in a bunch of data, didn't need internet, didn't need anything. That's as if it queried AWS with no logins or anything required. So I think if I run that again, it's probably going to it's even faster that time. So we've got our test. Okay, great. That's awesome. I could have already tested that. It's a pretty simple function, but what if I want to add some features to that? So that's when I find it becomes more useful. You come back to the code later. We want to add something else. So if we're going to do test-driven development, we should probably write our tests first. So that's what I've done. So we've got the same file again. And I've added a couple extra things. So what I want to do is previously I searched for an AMI ID. This time I want to be able to match the instance type and tell me if I give it an instance type, is this the one? So here we go. When instance is created with the specified instance type, I've got the same data. Again, I've just pulled that in again. I've mocked my return just like before, but I've added a new parameter here, instance type. And this is my function. I've got an instance type now. So this code is not running right now. I haven't actually written this. I've put my test in there. So I've got should return a valid object. So the function actually will return the result of get EC2 instance essentially if it matches. So I'm just checking to see if the instance type that I've specified is inside the properties of that object. So should contain, so is it in there? And there's loads of comparators here, they're fairly straightforward, but and then this one here should be, so the instant ID that I get back should match the one I gave it. So obviously that's obvious, it shouldn't be different because that's not the desired behavior. So if I run that, it should, two different types of PowerShell here, PowerShell 4. So if I run that, it fails because obviously that code doesn't exist yet. So these are all the tests I had before. This is the new stuff I've added. So it's failed. That's what I want because now when I write my code, as long as this passes, my code is good. So that's all I need to know. So that's one of the tenets of test-driven development. Write your tests first. Write them and think about your functionality when you're writing your tests. And then all you need to do is pass the tests, and you've done it properly. So
Sounds like cheating. I used to cram for tests.
It's a weird sensation when you actually do this and you've written a bunch of tests that you know are right, and then you just bang out code until it passes, and that passes, and you kind of go, well, okay, well I didn't even run it like once my test passed, you know. But if they pass, that means you did it right. So in a small piece of code like this, you know, you could just bang out the code. But as it gets more and more complex, this becomes hugely useful. And I've found it's really useful when you're adding functionality. So you're coming back to it later and adding something because you forget how it works.
As the code is more complex, then also your tests need to become more complex.
Yes, yes, but they should be. They shouldn't be overly complex. So I'll cover some of the things that you shouldn't do. Some of the kind of alleyways that you can just stumble down when you really shouldn't, because you can go too far. And actually make your tests way more complex than your code, and that's I think that's a mistake a lot of people make, and then they come back because they're like, well, this is a waste of time. So there is a healthy balance there, and if you do it right, it really works. So, all right, so we go back to our code. I've actually already written it. We go back to our function over here. All right, so. This is a copy of the other one, but I've added my new parameter. So if instance type, if it contains the instance type, give me a little log and return the object, else return null. Okay, so I've actually made a mistake here. I don't know if you can notice the mistake. I'll give you a minute to see if you can notice it. And by minute, I mean a few seconds, because you might notice it. Anyone notice it?
Contains.
No, it's not a mistake.
Are you meant to have the dollar after contains?
Instance.
It's got it. Okay, so one person got it.
Where is it? I still don't see it.
Oh, you'll see it right.
Okay.
Yeah.
You see it?
In stats.
Oh, I see it. There it is.
Instead,
Yeah.
this is a legit mistake.
Okay.
I did not make this up. I made this mistake, and then I went, oh, I'll show you this, guys, because I wasn't planning on putting a mistake there, but that actually happened. So it looks fine. If I actually run this code, it executes. It doesn't give me an error. It just doesn't do it doesn't behave the way I expect. So this is a good example of where unit tests or testing will actually find this. So I'll show you.
And how many times have we seen a spelling mistake like that that's near impossible to spot?
So, and this is such a simple piece of code, right? You could do this, and I've got another example that's that was also a legit mistake that I came back to in another one. So I'll just quickly we'll go back to our test. And because I've already written the test, I'll just dot this in my new file. And I'll execute that. There you go. Code exists, I get an error. So when I give it a specified instance type, it shouldn't return null because it should match, but it's actually giving me a null. So you expect a null, but got the same value. So that's not what I expected. And then again, should return a valid object containing that these will all fail because it's doing the opposite. It's not matching at all.
It's a spelling error. There's a spelling error there. It should return a valid object.
Oh, there, yeah. Contain.
Contain,
Yeah. Well, luckily that doesn't affect the code.
You sure that's not your error?
You get extra points for that one. Did not say that. So, yeah. So this is a case where the code executes, the code runs. In a more complex thing, I may never find a problem like that because it still runs. Just it could be a very specific scenario where this doesn't work the way you think it does, and it's not until you put it in production that someone notices, and it could be really bad stuff like
And
delete a
10
file.
people could look at that code and miss it.
Exactly. Yeah. And the more complex it is, the
Well, 10 people did look at that code and miss it.
That's right. So so we'll go back and fix that. So I can look at this code and go, what the hell? And then come back, find my cursor, there we go. Where am I supposed to go? All right.
Sorry, what hint did it give you that was the error?
So what I did was in this test, if we go back to the test, in my context, what I did was the test data is actually just an object with an instance type in it. And I've said in this context, I've said, I know that this data contains the instance ID that I'm giving it. So I know that when I run this code, it should give me the instance back because it matches. So actually that's the wrong context. This context here. So if you look at the JSON file, that JSON file contains this instance ID with one of these types because I've made sure it did. I've edited that file, so it contains that. So I know when I put that, return that result to my function, it should say it matches and give me the object back. So, but when I ran it, it didn't. It gave me a null instead of what I expected. So I've designed this scenario specifically knowing that it should do the thing I expect. So that's the basis for these tests, right?
So what would give you the hint is that you go and look at where it's returning the null and work out how you got there. Why did I end up in the null when I should have ended up?
That's right. So you would step through your code, right? So, you know, and this is literally what I did because I got an error. I couldn't figure out why. You know, and I literally said, okay, well, this is pretty standard. Okay, so if this, it should do this, but it's doing this. It's just hitting the else. It's not matching this at all.
So it has to be on line 55, the error.
Exactly. So, and I'm not sure if it actually outputted the line where the error was. Expected null. Well, that's the code there. Should contain that. So,
Yeah, I think it will throw the error.
line 68. Yeah. Anyway, so.
PowerShell's really good for that.
Yeah. And if you step through it, I literally stepped through that code, and just saw, well, hang on, you know, that moused over and it was nothing, and then noticed the mistake straight away.
Yeah, what really gives you the hint is that you're ending up on 160, and you expect it to end up on 157.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So.
It's definitely line 54. Just saying, it's definitely line 54.
Good to do now.
So, okay, so we'll fix that mistake, saved it. Just run that code again. Hey, passed. So it does the thing we expect. Now we know we fixed it because it does that. So it hinges on you, you know, designing your tests first. If you write code and then write tests after, it's very hard because you've already decided your functionality. You haven't really thought about, you know, often you just bang the code out and then you come back to it. So if you design your test first, it's like, you know, designing your scaffolding of your code before you do the code, which is, you know, generally a good way to do it. So it kind of forces you into doing that. So you kind of understand how it's going to work, and then you make it work. So and the point of unit tests is that you do it at a very small unit. You know, you're just testing one tiny function, and then eventually you're stringing that all together into a bigger piece of code. So in this case, yeah, this function is very simple. It really just does a string match. You know, is this here, and it should give me something. So very easy to test, and you just want to do that, you know, as much as possible. And it does force you to think about how your functions return things. Sometimes you might write a function that does something but never returns because why would you need it to return? But if you're testing for it, you probably do want it to return because you can check it actually did the thing. So,
one thing I found that makes it easy to pick up things like typos is to set strict mode in your actual context.
Yeah.
So if you do that in your actual tests, that should have picked it up saying that this is a valid property of whatever the current one was.
Yeah. So there's again, this was a fairly simple example, but yeah, you can really tie it down. Like I probably should have cast that to the right type and then tested it was the type that I expected, because I could maybe return an array when I'm expecting a different object type, and so you can do all sorts of things like that. So, all right, the next one. So. Again, like I said before, Pester is primarily designed about unit testing your functions, but you can actually test script blocks with it, and I'll kind of show you how. I've actually done this in a production system to test something. So let's jump back. This was actually inspired by something Wayne had a bit of a thought project about. So, and I actually did this for realsies. So we'll have a look at the code. mouse cursor. Alright, so here's my script. It's essentially the same function again, but I've got some work actually in sort of my main script block. So same function, but then I've got some logic that I've put in my script block, and I want to test for this logic. I've already tested my function, but now I want to test this. How can I do this? And this actually started because Wayne was positing, because we work a lot with Azure runbooks. Runbooks are essentially like functions. They've got a parameter block at the top. You tend to return something. It looks just like a function, but it's a script. So surely we can test that. So I'll show you we've got a script block unit test. So what this is actually doing, and I'll link to the blog article that Wayne did, and I've just kind of ran with it a little bit. Essentially, all it's doing is ingesting your script and wrapping it in a function. Like it's putting a function block at the top, sticking a little curly brace at the bottom, and saying, I'm a function. So it's creating a new file with that, and then we're just dot sourcing that in, essentially, and we're just testing it like that. We're pretending it's a function. There's some oddities that come up when you do that, which I've tried to work through. You can see there's a couple of things I've actually done extra. So where it's got any exits, I've actually replaced them with throws, and then we can actually test for that. So we can test that it exits. Because of the function, we can test for a throw. I've removed all the dot sourcing because it's within the function. When we dot source the function, it doesn't actually run our dot sourcing until we execute, so the mocks don't work. I am going to enhance this a little bit, so it actually dot sources any dot sources it encounters. But for the moment, I've just escaped all the dot sourcing, just commented it out, and then I've done my own dot sourcing. In this case, I don't have any extra, but essentially you just list them here. Dot source any of my other files that I'm pulling in, but in this case we don't have any. So essentially we write this out to a file, and then I dot source that file in, and then I run my tests. So I'm doing a similar thing. So I'm actually mocking a bunch of commandments, including write host, so it doesn't just blat out my output when I execute, because it's just a script. So I've mocked. That's right. So my script. So what it does different is essentially just if it matches. Give me a message, send an SMS message, and if it doesn't match, and if it does match, tag it. It doesn't actually run the tag, but that's the idea. So if the instance doesn't match, send a message out to tell me, there's something wrong with it because it should match this, this data. And if it does match, then give it a tag. Okay, so I want to test that my code is actually going to do that. So that's essentially what I want to test here. So I've got my mocks, so I'm just mocking all those commandlets so they don't actually execute. Put the same data in as I did before, and then I run my script. So my script is actually now just a function. So I pass it in the parameters that I've got in my param block. And then I'm actually testing that my mocks were called. So this is a nice simple way of doing it because my function doesn't return anything. It's a script, so it doesn't return anything. So we're using an assert mock called. So it's actually just checking, and I can say 0 times. So here, when I run it with this certain amount of data, I don't expect it to tag, so I expect it to match. So I can say assert mock called 0. You have to put exactly because otherwise it's 0 or more. So assert that this mock was not called, essentially. And I've got another test, so I would expect this one to be called, that one not to be called, that one to be called, and that one to be called. So I want it to publish a message. Simple, really. And then I've got another context here, which is the opposite. So, no, this is my throw. So I've got, if it's null, the script should exit. So in this case, I'm doing executing my script, writing my it. And then, because I'm not giving it any parameters, it should just exit. And because I've replaced my exits with throws, we can do a should -throw, and that is a special parameter that stops it from actually exiting the script. It will capture it. So this just makes sure it exits, and then I've got the opposite test again. So now I'm just testing that it does tag, and it's just a complete opposite of that. So if we run that,
It looks like. So this is really handy because you could be running a remove, for example, on something.
Based on that information,
Yeah.
exactly. So
It's something very important.
Yes.
And you want to make sure you don't run remove when you pass it a while past.
exactly, yeah. So you know, you tend to write a lot of scripts, and you'll have, you know, and the common thing is you've got functions, and you've still got a bunch of logic that strings together those functions. So this can be quite useful, and I'll show you a real world one in a second. So yeah, execute that. Oh, got an error. Oh yeah, I did expect that. So in my describe, that's where it was actually generating the file. So a big file can sometimes take a while, but it will generate that. So I've got an error. It said it should have run new ECG tag, but it didn't. So you expected that to be called 1 times, but it was called 0 times. And the opposite again, it actually called this one. So what do? I actually forget what mistake I made in this. Let's see if I can find it. So we go to our script. Oh no. Okay. I've made a mistake here. Let's see if I can go across. Anyone figure out where it is? Yeah, it's here. Again, this was a legit one. I just, or in automated mode. So AMID is actually an array.
Ooh.
Yeah. So what this is actually doing is turning it into a big ass string.
Yeah.
So it's not going to. It's just going to be. It's never going to match. Essentially, it's a string, not an array. So that's why it broke. If I actually take that out.
I'm so glad you have the it's here. We'd never find it.
Again, that was a legit one. I just was in autopilot, just typing it in, yeah, and I couldn't, you know, went back to figure out what I held, and that one actually took me a while because even though I wrote the code, I couldn't remember that. Oh shit, that would actually give me a string.
Is there a reason why you wrap some of the parameters in strings instead of just passing the variable itself?
It's just something I've done. It's kind of just a convention, you know, like. If you've got some weird characters, it can. I think it's like it escapes them or something.
Yeah, we have a habit of doing everything in sub-expression.
Yeah.
In that notation, if it's a string,
Yeah.
if it's not a string, we tend not to do that.
Yeah.
It's just a habit that we've
Yeah,
got.
it's just a habit.
I'm not actually sure if it's a good idea.
No.
Because you
It just seems to be
fell
fairly
over
wild.
because you actually cast an array to a string.
To a string, that's right. It was actually
So
just a string.
Potentially could be casting stuff that shouldn't be.
Exactly.
Yeah, like if that was a hash table, it would be system.collections.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
right. Yeah.
Yeah. So we have
Why
to
do
do
I
that.
Wow.
So yeah. Anyway, that was a legit mistake I made. It took me a little while to find that one. It's because I just do it all the time without even thinking. And what actually happened was originally that was just a string, and then I went, oh, it would be better as an array. And you know, in your mind, you just always think it's a string.
Your unit test picked it up.
Exactly. And it executes now. So it does the thing that we expect. So yeah, designing tests, and again, this is a script block, so I've actually used this a bit, and it's quite useful.
And how easy would that error have been missed in code review and even your own review and your own testing? Very
Exactly,
easy.
and yeah, this is exactly where we've found it in the real world. You know, like you'll look at that and assume that is right.
Yeah.
Because you didn't write the code, and I wrote the code, and I still missed it. So,
And you're not going to look up the commandlet.
yeah, exactly. So, yeah.
Is there a reason why you wrapped that script in a function instead of just invoking the script block?
I'm not even sure that even works.
So, like, I saw you were changing the exit so it
Yeah.
doesn't break Pester.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
would
it
have
was-
thought you'd just be able to use the call operator to call your script block in your test.
Why was that?
To call your script block.
No, I don't think that worked. Pester is totally written around, so I don't think a lot of the mocks and all the other stuff work when we do that.
Okay.
Yeah. Pretty sure that just it breaks a bunch of stuff. It doesn't behave the way you think it does. Yeah. And because I was editing all the, or other parts of the script in order to make it a bit more testable, like the dot sourcing and stuff. So yeah.
How would you, like from a PowerShell perspective, obviously testing, so let's say you've got classes, PowerShell 5 classes. Does Pester test support that as well? In the sense that basically you can mock, in essence, methods within that, or is it only like limited to commandlets itself?
As far as I understand, it's only commandlets.
Okay.
Mock only supports commandlets.
The fact that you said it doesn't support .NET methods.
Yeah. You can't do .NET methods. You've got to wrap them all.
The
So,
class,
yeah.
the methods of the class would be-
or functions, I should say. Yeah, functions really. Yeah. Okay. But again, like it has some limitations, but for the vast majority of things, it just makes everything so easy. Yeah. All right, so I've got a real world example of a much bigger script that I've actually used this for. Close all this stuff.
Oh, this monster.
Yeah, this monster. So in this case, I did the bad thing. I wrote this script quite some time ago, no tests, and it's a beast. It's not a good script.
It's actually a very good script.
It does a bunch of
Solves
stuff.
a very, very specific business need.
It has a lot of crazy logic in it that got built over time because of crazy logic. So it's removing files and doing some policy-based retention essentially. And it's making queries to Salesforce. It's integrating file system. It's sending emails. It's generating JSON files, generating reports in various CSV formats. So it does a lot of stuff. I think it's about 1,000 lines.
Was this the script that actually made us go, we need unit testing?
Could have been.
It could have been. It feels like it was the one. Because
Could have
I
been.
feel like I had to recode
Yeah.
it.
Also, I was overseas. So I was overseas
Yes.
writing this,
Yeah.
and everyone else was here, different time zones, no interaction while I was developing it, so totally in isolation.
Yeah.
So I'm pretty sure you just gave up
Yeah.
doing it. You just
Yeah.
said, okay, I believe you, and you
Yeah.
approved it.
Yeah.
Because it was impossible. It was impossible to read this thing. So
And then I can't test it without actually running it against like a massive amount of stuff I'd have to fake.
that's right. No, it was impossible to test because it deleted stuff. It was pulling data from Salesforce. And it was just a beast. So you can see it's got a huge amount of parameters. We'll zip through it. A few little functions, and then a massive giant script block that does some to-dos in there. There's always new stuff to be done for this. Yeah. This is this is being relied upon. Like if it doesn't work, we could breach contract requirements. So it's super important. It's doing some Salesforce queries, pulling in some data. It's dot sourcing in a few different files for various different functionality. On and on and on. Keeps going. Right, so I wrote this, and I needed
Oh, there's your arrow. I found the arrow.
Oh, there it is. Yeah, there's typing mistake.
Yeah, I saw it on 997.
I thought it was get child item and then recurse file.
Recurse,
and remove,
recurse, yeah.
remove item.
Yep. If only it was that simple. So I actually needed to add a feature to this, and I hadn't looked at it in 2 months, 3 months maybe, and I had to come back to it, and I just went, oh shit. I had to reread it, try and understand. I said, okay, I'm going to write tests for this thing. So
The comments are good. They're really good.
Yeah. Commenting helps. So this is actually my testing that I built for this, and again, I did this retroactively, which I do not recommend. This helped me actually learn a lot of stuff about. This is where I went down the whole route of turning this into a function, essentially, doing all my dot sourcing, and then dot sourcing in all my files. So what I've actually got here, and this is actually kind of a mix between integration testing and unit testing, because I am actually making some real files, some test files, but I'm still making them. I'm not trying to fake get child item, just because I couldn't be bothered at the time. It was too hard. But you could do that if you really wanted to. I've just got a function that basically generates my little environment, creates some dummy files and a structure that we would expect. And then I've actually faked my Salesforce data. So this was super useful because I couldn't query Salesforce from outside of our normal network. I didn't want to delete real files. So I actually did some queries, converted them to JSON, and then just changed them from there. So it would look like there's my test data. So, and this is a giant object too. I only actually query a few fields of this, but it's like there's date delivered and there's a few other like file name, and so it looks in this for some source information, then goes and does the thing. So having this fate meant I could run this as many times as I want. So hugely useful, and I actually found some missing functionality, actually missing scenarios that I did not expect, that no one had actually reported. But what it actually do is, if a certain type of data was missing, it would never report on it. So that's important. But it, I added the test and then it failed, and I could not figure out that shouldn't fail. That definitely does that. No, it didn't actually cater to that scenario at all. So, but yeah, it took quite some time.
Did you flipped that because you had sufficient cross-sectional data to present that scenario?
Exactly. So once I built my sort of test scenario, all I had to do was just iterate. So all I did was make a bunch of context. So what I did was, and a lot of this is copy paste. It's just slightly changed data for each one. So in this I've got well, this is a normal scenario that happens every day. This is what I kind of tested the code when I was building it. If it's got this data and the file's older than 2 days, it should delete it and give me a report. So I mock, actually, in this case, here's a parameter filter. So I'm actually mocking test path in this case, because this code tests for a WSDL file. I don't know if anyone's used SOAP requests. I hate it, but it tests for the existence of this WSDL file, but I don't need it in this case. So but I need test path for other parts of the functionality. So I've got it returning a true, but only when I call test path with this particular path in it. So when I hit test path with a path of this, it will return true. So my script just thinks it's there and it will continue on. But if I do a test path in one of my test files, it will work. It won't run that mock. It will actually run. So you don't have to mock everything, but you need to mock the important stuff. Mocked a bunch of things, export CSV, sending a bunch of things. So this is my Salesforce record. So I've got a command called get SF records, and I'm sending it that JSON file that's already been converted. So, so I'll go down blah blah blah. These are all the parameters that I'm actually passing it. So there's a lot of stuff. I run it, and then I'm checking. Did it in my test drive? So Pester has the whenever you create a context, it creates a temporary directory that you can then call. You don't need to care where it is. You can just put stuff in there and it will clean it up on its own. So I've put all my test files in there, and then I go and, after I've run the script, I go and see, did it actually delete those? Because I expected to delete that. I check the count, check some other things, make sure it didn't execute these other things, which it shouldn't. And then I'm actually, it's generating a JSON file that's like my report. So I can go and query that for things that I expect. So it should have this many deleted files in it. And it's just checking the count. That doesn't really matter what the query is, but it's checking my JSON file at the end for a count that should be exactly this amount. So what I found, if I go down to the context all the way down the bottom, so it looks big and daunting, but it's actually just rinse, repeat over and over again with different scenarios in it to test each one. I probably tested more than I really needed to in this case, but as soon as I found that error, I got super paranoid and added tests for all sorts of things. So what I actually found was when I had a certain amount of data and the file had been deleted before, and in this case it was audio, and the audio was missing, it would report A-OK. It deletes the document, but didn't actually report that the audio wasn't there, that the information was wrong from Salesforce. So if a human puts in the wrong information, I would actually not report that was an error. So I did not expect that. There was some very specific scenarios which I catered for, which happened, and total blind spot, totally missed it. So once I just added a test for it, which I thought was obvious, I said, oh, if the transcript's there but the audio's not there, well, that'll return an error, but it didn't. So I had to go back and figure that out. But so once I did all that, I actually added some new features, and adding the feature was as simple as actually it's just this context here, I think, where boom, I crashed it.
Carrera G.
And
Did it actually
that was
crash?
a new feature. No, I just hit the desktop. I think I did a 3-finger swipe. Anyway, so it essentially what did it actually do? Oh wait, the scroll is actually reversed now. It's oh yeah, it was to handle duplicates or something. Yeah. So Oh no, that's right. Yeah. It was to clean up a report. So anyway, so you generate this massive report every time, and it didn't clean up the old entries, and so the production staff would have to go and clean it up themselves. So that was something they really wanted because these things got giant. So had to add that feature. Couldn't remember how all the code worked. Added the test once I'd done all the others. So if I'd actually done the test before, this would have been super easy. Just add that one little bit of test at the end to say, once it's generated and I generate my report, it should only contain 5 items. And then I just need to add that code and I'll know that it works with 100% confidence. And I'm actually, in here I actually pull in a CSV and just do a count on it and see that it's got the number of items I expect it to. So yeah, this was a beast. And I wish I did the tests before because it would have been much better.
Can you run these ones or no?
Yeah, I can actually. Yeah. It might take a second to generate a file because it's enormous. Okay. And I'll actually do. So the other part, and this is something developers deal with all the time.
Do you want to do the font size as well?
Yes. No, there'll be too much information. You won't even see it.
Okay.
Yeah. What it actually says is probably not really important.
Okay.
Yeah.
Whether it's green or red, that's what we need to know.
No, green or red, that's the important part.
I was expecting Wayne's the best every time. I'm like, wow, someone's trolling.
Yeah.
So the describe is where it's actually generating my test file. So this takes a second.
You were going to put a parameter there. What was that you intended to do?
I was going to add code coverage. So code coverage is a part of unit testing. You're trying to figure out, how much of your code is actually covered by your tests.
Yeah.
So I'll come back to that in a second. But,
So for methods never called, functions never called.
yeah, that's right. Some code is never called, and actually it'll spit out a report at the end actually saying that, and I'll show you in a second. So yeah, loads of tests, 68 tests. It took a little while just because the script file takes a while to generate. But essentially you can see all these are green, and these are all the different scenarios.
It took a little while, but imagine if you ran each of those scenarios yourself manually.
That's right. Well, I mean, I didn't obviously.
Yeah.
I couldn't.
No.
In some cases, I could not test that. Not with real confidence. And I can add new tests. Someone else can go and review this code, and we've got this all set up in CI/CD. So whenever a new commit comes in our Azure DevOps account, it just runs the test. So when we go to do a pull request and get it approved, the tests have already run, so they can see that the tests have passed. So we should be all good. But yes, again, I don't recommend doing it retroactively. It's a mistake. Don't do that. Yeah, it's worth doing it.
It's still worth adding tests to your scripts if they don't have any tests, even if you haven't done it properly first.
Yeah, yes, I think definitely. But again, it's the time investment. If you're learning, this is a great way to learn how to do it because you're forced to. If you're going back to some scripts, it's definitely worth doing. I wouldn't go back and do it to all the ones that's running in production. You'll never be able to justify that to the business because it'll just take too long. But
when you go back to make a change,
to make a change, that's the time to do it really. So, okay. But as I said, you don't want to overdo it. This is a mistake a lot of people make. Always test your output, your final. That's what you want to test. You can get mired in. Thinking about how your code works and testing the minutiae of it. I'll make sure this string is this, or that this type is this. Inside a function, it doesn't matter. All that matters is what happens at the end. Because if you refactor your code, or you change something, or someone else changed something, it will break all your tests. What really matters is what happens at the end. So always just think about that when you're doing your testing, and so you won't overcomplicate it for no reason. It's easy to do, really easy to do. So just be careful. Just think about what should it do at the end. That's what you care about. Don't go down that rabbit hole. Trust me. Check your code coverage. So when is enough? Literature says about 70% is about good enough. And I think most tools will give you red if it's less than 70% and green if it's over. And I'll show you when you do a code coverage report. Should be able to do one now. File, code coverage. Okay. So you want to run this again.
So what are you passing into that code coverage program?
Just the file. So code coverage
So
and
the
the file I'm actually going to the script file. Yeah. So in this case, it's the script file I generated, but otherwise it would be the file that you've got your functions in or whatever. So it's going to run the test again, but it's already analysed the script file that I've put in there, and at the end it will kind of give me a report. It will show me all the code that I haven't touched, I haven't hit, and it's a good way to figure out how much you should actually do. And you can actually see, it'll help you build more tests, because you'll see, oh, like I never hit that error scenario. I actually never hit that, because it'll just show you those lines of code, you never touched them. So if you're looking at that, it does help a lot, because you can be overly verbose and actually miss a scenario that you didn't think of. So let's quickly let that run. Yeah, okay. So all of these lines here are stuff that code I haven't touched. So you can see how many tests, how big this freaking project is. Okay, so it's probably hard to see there, but coverage 73% of 660 analysed commands. And these are all the bits of code that it actually never touches. Some of this is not important, some of them are just like logging and other things. But there are some scenarios down here, I think, where I've got some if loops and I'm testing, and I've got some error handling that I actually haven't even touched. So it does help. But 73%, that's good enough. I didn't need to spend any more time on that. I covered all the important stuff.
If you put some errors into it, those get error ones that it didn't cover would probably be covered then.
That's right. That's right. I think in that case, those get errors are actually just blatting out my error message. So I didn't really care about those. But yeah, there are a couple of scenarios here I will get back to eventually. But a lot of this is just logging. But yeah, 73%, 70%. That's about enough. That's about the sweet spot most of the time. So yeah. So what else we got here? So yeah, don't overdo it, but questions?
Have you tried running the test from inside Visual Studio? Not Visual Studio, Visual Studio Code.
VS Code.
The one test and debug.
I don't normally do that, just because I like the output. Like I can blow it out to a big screen. I just prefer that. I can actually try it. I can try one.
Yeah, it definitely does run in code.
Yeah, it does. Yeah. I just don't do it that much really. Actually, don't even know where it is. Does anyone know where that is?
Go to your describe it sections and stuff like that.
Oh yes, you can click run test. Yes, you're right. I've actually never even tried that.
You can also run the whole script by just pressing F5 and it'll run.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, you can just run the script and it'll just run it as long as you've got Pester installed. So
you were saying that Pester creates a temporary or a testing directory. Is that an actual file system directory?
Yes, it is. It's in your user temp.
Program data.
Yeah, program data.
How do you access it? Or how do you get it?
So it creates a PS drive for you called test drive :
Yep.
or test drive :
So that means you have to use a PowerShell command to access that. You couldn't use .NET methods to do that.
Well, I mean, you could get the path from that and then pass it to a method.
Yeah.
So yeah, you could just literally just recurse that, find out what that real path is, and then just use that. It doesn't change inside your describe. So in the what it'll do actually inside a context, so you can put a bunch of files in there, and then when it exits that context, it actually remembers what files were in there. It creates a list, and it will remove those. So you can have files in your describe that all your context can access. And then the stuff in your context, it will actually remove each time. So you can do some clever things like that, but it's always the same directory.
Okay.
Yeah, so you could reference it like that. So yeah, that makes testing really simple. You don't have to go and clean up. You can just create all your stuff, and then it just cleans it up, and you go to the next test.
So I've got trouble to dwell on that a little bit. So it was under the program data, there's actual files laid out, but you mentioned like a drive. So there's like a file system provider that gives it a drive.
Yes, it uses
it's
a PS drive.
It's a PS drive
For that session, and it puts it in that temp drive. But you actually don't really need to care about it. You can just reference that. Yeah, it's just a directory, and at the end of the describe log, it's gone. It deletes it. So.
And your antivirus can totally delete stuff on there while you're running your integration tests.
Yes,
it can happen.
Yes, it can. That's super useful. For integration testing, when you're doing more real stuff, when you're not doing as much mocking, that's useful. But useful, in general, to put stuff in, and it cleans it up and just does all the work for you. Once you understand the structure, It's a lot simple.
So fill up your C drive on the production server when you run the user test.
Well, yeah, if you create enough of them, yeah.
So do you run so you write your tests and then you write your code?
Yes.
Yep. Okay. So, for example, let's say you've got your function that you're working on, and you need to add some extra functionality to it.
Yep.
Obviously, let's say you have to extend the parameter set block on your function. How would you write tests? Like, because I'm just trying to understand how you write a test for something that you actually haven't done a discovery on, or.
Yeah. So.
Oh, okay. You can say anything if you like, but it is a different way of thinking.
I always
about
love
it.
that question.
It is a very different way of thinking. I mean, you think about the step before you write any code. Now, sometimes you might write some code to see how something works. That's cool. You can do that. But at a certain point, you are deciding how your thing is going to work. What things you might need.
Yep.
The scaffolding, I like to call it, the scaffolding of your program or your function or whatever. At some point you have to think about that. Testing does force you to think about that sometimes earlier than you normally would.
Yep.
If you're, especially with PowerShell scripting, where you can just bang out code, run, bang out code, run it, bang out code, run it. It's a different way of thinking. Whereas in the compiled development side of it, you don't. It's not as free flowing as that. You do have to think about that a lot more because it's slower to just execute the code.
So from writing it, just trying to understand. So what you would do is, let's say you're creating a new VM and a client Hyper-V.
Yeah.
So basically, you would pretty much write the successful test, and then basically for new VM, and then once you've done that, then basically you can actually write your code and validate it against that test.
Correct.
Okay. That makes sense.
So you can think of your business. You can think of you writing your test to pass your business requirements.
Yeah.
So someone said to you, I want you to back up that SQL server every night with PowerShell script.
Yeah.
So you'd expect it to run the backup job.
Yeah.
You'd expect it to send us an email to tell us it did it or something like that.
Yeah.
And if you don't pass it a validated database to back up, you'd expect it to throw or error. So you already got your tests.
So you already, and you've already defined your input and what you're.
That's right.
Yeah, okay.
That's right.
That makes sense.
You're just thinking about your input
Yeah.
and what you want, what you expect at the end. Yeah.
Another question is, because this kind of I was just thinking about, especially with your with your other script, where you obviously, actually, I think it's your other script that you had when you're talking to Cortex.
Yeah.
Salesforce.
Salesforce. Why do they call it Cortex?
I don't know, but Salesforce.
So when you're talking to Salesforce, obviously you mocked the WSDL file without going into super detail, extensive details. Let's say for example, obviously you're doing a lot of SOAP queries. You've obviously done all that. That's all. You're just mocking that data. So basically, you've just got. I'm guessing you just have some JSON files that you're referencing in terms of, some Salesforce orders that you've had.
Yeah.
From to put the shoe on the other foot. So let's say you've got, for example, something like an API endpoint where you actually have to manage, for example, an active token session or something like that.
Yeah.
And you need to write unit tests to validate. Well, you wouldn't even write. You'd have to write integration tests. I'm guessing where you'd have to validate the state of that, for example, that token.
Yeah.
So would that be better set for integration testing or unit testing? You'd have to
unit
actually
testing,
hit that endpoint.
That's right. Changes the way you code.
Yeah.
So it can change. If you're thinking about that right at the start, you probably have a function that does just that tiny little unit of code. So that's the idea. So you've got something that does your login and returns something. Then you've got another function that you then pass that to and does it. So you can. So if you're importing some data and returning an object, you can test for that. Do you see what I mean? So
you would
you're breaking your code into smaller pieces.
But the things, like you said, you don't want to go down the rabbit hole and be validating each specific.
No, but it might change the way you write. So a function might do a bunch of things, all in one function. Whereas if you were thinking about how you might test it, you might break that up into a few functions in order to make it easy to test.
Okay, because obviously the real world example for me is that my module that I wrote, its core functionality is all in. It doesn't use functions.
Yeah.
The core the core functionality that maintains your OAuth2 tokens is all in methods
Yeah.
and in PowerShell classes.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of like, from a testing perspective, yeah, I can mock all my commandlets. They're actually really easy to mock because of the way that it's built.
Yeah.
But to actually test the core functionality, like I feel like
I've never tried that. Does that work? If you create like an instance of the class, PowerShell class, and then call a method, can you assert mocks called inside that and test?
I have
don't know.
not. I have not tried that. I haven't tried.
Twice with it to call the command that's been.
I think the way around that would be
Yeah.
It's worth testing.
The thing is because from my perspective, I'm kind of like, in some situations, like there should be a clear distinction between like commandlets when you should be writing functions. Sorry, rephrase. Using functions and when you actually should be really using classes.
Yeah.
But the thing is that kind of like I really want to test my classes because
I'll give it a try.
Yeah, that's where 99% of my errors come from. And so the only way I had to for example, to mitigate that issue was to actually write blogging into it, and then I had Pester tests outside it that would basically trigger my run, like I trigger the process, but I wouldn't actually know any sort of output because of the way that it was malforming the output, so it wasn't like, and you can't test inside it, so
I don't know. If you get a chance to try it, let me know. I haven't had a chance to try that yet. So.
I think like from that instance, I think what I'd probably be able to do would be, rather than to do that, basically like have a function that basically like tests, not necessarily test that process because it already have a function that can a user can actually re-auth. So and then basically write the test against that. So basically the logic that is required that needs to be tested could then just be tested against that. So you don't actually have to test inside the core of the product, but you can actually test, you're keeping it simple and then obviously testing the commandlet.
So like if you're testing your functions in your class, it's probably more integration testing.
That's what I'm thinking.
You want to separate the logic that can go into small blocks into other commandlets and then do unit tests on those.
So in that instance, I think so like for example in that example, I would like do logic tests, like unit tests against the commandlets themselves. So what output am I expecting? How is that supposed to be working? And then from that, then basically if I want to test those other items, that would become the integration testing. Okay, cool.
So sorry guys. So just some quick things. That's my blog. I'll put a post up there and I'll put it in the Slack channel about script block unit testing because there's a couple more things I wanted to do with that. Install Pester. It's already on your machines if you've got Windows 10, but install the latest version. It's great. PS Cones. We did mention this in a previous PowerShell group. It's all Pester tests. Like it's all based on Pester tests. You're reading Pester tests and you're trying to fix an error. So if you want to learn a bit about Pester, I didn't read that, but I wish I did when I started. I actually don't think it was released before that, but check it out. It's really good. If you just want to get familiar with the structure and stuff, it's just a game essentially that you play. It's my GitHub with some example code in it if you want to check that out. That's it.
Cool.
And for the two that found spelling mistakes, I've got some PowerShell Hero. I've got a PowerShell Hero sticker for you. So, high quality, got them custom printed.
Anyway, thanks guys. Thanks Mitchell.
No worries.
I think that's pretty much concludes it. So that concludes our session. So I hope you guys liked it. I obviously found it incredibly informative. We recorded this time, so I did notice the stream dropped out a few times, but that's obviously expected, due to obviously unforeseen issues. But I'll be uploading that and getting that sorted. So thanks guys, and that was really good. Thank you, Mitchell.
Contain.
It wasn't even your mistake.
Straight on the back.